The galaxy burned. For 32 years, the war between the Galactic Coalition and the Draxian Empire had raged across hundreds of star systems. Planets were destroyed, civilizations fell, countless lives were lost to a conflict that seemed to have no end in sight. The Galactic Coalition, a union of 17 advanced alien species, possessed incredible technology and vast numbers. The Draxian Empire, while smaller, fought with brutal efficiency and unwavering resolve. Neither side could gain a lasting advantage. The war had reached a bloody stalemate. Earth watched from the sidelines. Humans were aware of the conflict, but were kept at a distance by both warring factions. The Coalition and the Draxians both saw humans as too primitive, too unpredictable, and too violent to be trusted as full members of the galactic community. Limited trade was permitted. Cultural exchanges were allowed, but humans were firmly told they were not ready for full integration into galactic politics or military matters. Earth's requests to help with the war had been politely but firmly rejected many times. Let the adults handle this, was the common attitude among coalition diplomats when speaking privately about humans. On a rainy Tuesday morning in Washington, D.C., President Allison Wright looked out of the Oval Office window as her security team announced an unexpected visitor. Ambassador Xyrax of the Coalition had arrived without notice and requested an urgent meeting. "Send him in," the president said. She straightened her jacket and prepared herself. Unscheduled visits from the Coalition were rare and never without serious purpose. Ambassador Xyrax entered the room. His tall, slender frame and blue-tinted skin made him stand out among the human staff. Forearms were neatly folded in what humans had learned was a gesture of respect. His large eyes blinked slowly as he bowed. "Madam President, I come with grave news and an even graver request," Xyrax said, his translator device giving his words a slight mechanical tone. President Wright gestured to a chair. "Please sit, Ambassador. What brings you here so urgently?" "The Draxians have developed a new weapon. 3 coalition worlds have already fallen, billions of lives lost." Xyrax's voice remained level, but his upper arms trembled slightly. "Our military leaders project total defeat within 6 months unless something changes." The president's face remained calm, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm very sorry to hear this, Ambassador. But why come to us? The Coalition has rejected our offers of assistance many times before." Xyrax looked down. "Pride, arrogance, fear of your species' potential. Call it what you will, Madam President. We were wrong." He reached into a pocket and placed a small device on the desk. It projected a hologram showing the devastation of a once beautiful world. Cities in ruins, oceans boiling away, the horror of total war on a scale humans had never witnessed. This was Ilaria, a peaceful world of artists and philosophers, home to 12 billion souls. Xyrax's voice finally broke. "Now it is a graveyard." President Wright watched in silence as the hologram showed more worlds, more destruction. When it finally ended, she looked directly at the ambassador. "What exactly are you asking of Earth, Ambassador Xyrax?" "The Coalition formally requests Earth's military assistance in the war against the Draxian Empire." Xyrax stood and performed a deep bow, all 4 arms extended, the highest sign of respect in Coalition culture. "We need your help." President Wright stood as well. "I'll need to consult with the United Nations Security Council immediately. This is not a decision I can make alone." "Of course, Madam President, but please understand, time is against us." As Ambassador Xyrax was escorted out, President Wright picked up the phone to call an emergency meeting. The decision facing humanity was momentous. After decades of being dismissed as too primitive to matter, Earth was being asked to join the greatest war the galaxy had ever known. Little did the Coalition know that humans had been preparing for this day for years, and the Draxians had no idea what was coming. On the Coalition flagship orbiting Jupiter, military strategist Creel paced back and forth, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light of the command center. His tail swished in irritation as he addressed the gathered officers. "Ambassador Xyrax wastes our precious time," Creel said. "What can these humans possibly offer that our 17 advanced species cannot?" They barely left their own moon 60 years ago. Commander Vex, a veteran of 20 years of the Draxian War, raised a tentacle in disagreement. Do not underestimate them. I have studied their history. No species in the galaxy has fought against itself as often or as creatively as humans. Creel scoffed. Fighting with sticks and stones does not prepare them for modern space warfare. Debate was interrupted when a junior officer announced that Ambassador Xerax was returning from Earth, requesting immediate clearance to board with a small delegation of humans. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, a very different conversation was taking place. The United Earth Defense Initiative facility stretched for miles underground, hidden from Coalition and Draxian monitoring systems. Here, humans had been quietly preparing for decades. Dr. Frank Howe led a team of scientists and engineers who had been studying and reverse engineering alien technology that made its way to Earth through limited trade channels. What had started as curiosity had grown into something much more. Captain Samantha Powell walked beside Dr. Howe through the massive hangar where Earth's secret fleet was being prepared. The ships were smaller than standard Coalition vessels, but incorporated designs that even the most advanced alien engineers had never considered. Are they ready? Captain Powell asked, looking at the 12 sleek vessels. Dr. Howe nodded. As ready as they'll ever be. We've tested everything except actual combat conditions. Let's hope they work as well in practice as they do in simulations, Captain Powell said. She checked her watch. The President wants us ready to demonstrate the Blake device for the Coalition delegation in 2 hours. Can you have it prepared? Howe smiled. It's been ready for 5 years. We've just been waiting for someone to ask. When Ambassador Xerax arrived at the Rocky Mountain facility, with Commander Vex and strategist Creel, they were greeted by President Wright herself. The Coalition officials were confused by the location, expecting to be taken to a military base or government building. What is this place? Creel demanded, looking around the plane entrance corridor with disdain. President Wright smiled. This, gentlemen, is why Earth has never pushed to join your war before now. We needed time. The doors opened to reveal the massive underground complex. Coalition officials gasped as they saw the activity below. Thousands of personnel moved purposefully around advanced equipment and technology that the aliens recognized, as similar to, yet distinctly different from their own. Impossible, Creel whispered. Captain Powell approached and saluted. Welcome to UEDI headquarters. If you'll follow me, we've prepared a demonstration. The group was led to a secure testing chamber where Dr. Howe stood next to a device no larger than a kitchen appliance. A Draxian communication module, acquired through back channels, sat on a table nearby. What is this? Commander Vex asked, tentacles twitching with curiosity. We call it the Blake device after its inventor, Dr. Howe explained. It does something your engineers have been trying to accomplish for 15 years. Dr. Howe activated the device. Energy pulsed toward the Draxian module. Instead of destroying it, the energy seemed to flow into it, changing the patterns of light on its surface. You've accessed it, Creel said in shock. That's a military-grade Draxian communication system with 57 layers of quantum encryption. How? Captain Powell smiled. We think differently than you do. While your scientists tried to break through each layer of security sequentially, we looked for a pattern across all layers simultaneously. President Wright stepped forward. This is just one example of what humanity can offer your war effort. We have 11 more that we're ready to demonstrate. For the first time in 32 years of war, something new had entered the equation. As the Coalition officials watched in stunned silence, they began to understand that humans might not be so primitive after all. The United Nations Security Council gathered in New York for their most important meeting in history. Representatives from all permanent member nations sat around the large circular table. The room was tense. No one spoke above a whisper as they waited for the session to begin. President Wright stood at the podium, her face serious. Behind her, a large screen showed images of distant worlds destroyed by the Draxian Empire. Next to her stood Ambassador Xerax, who had just finished describing the dire situation facing the Coalition. Ladies and gentlemen, President Wright began, For decades, humanity has been told we were not ready for full participation in galactic affairs. Today, that has changed. The Coalition has formally requested our help in their war against the Draxians. Murmurs filled the room. Some officials looked worried, others seemed eager. Before we vote, I've asked 2 experts to present their assessments, the President continued. First, Admiral Jack Pearson will provide our military analysis. Admiral Pearson, a tall man with gray hair and a weathered face, approached the podium. He had commanded Earth's space forces for 15 years and had secretly overseen much of the reverse engineering program. The Draxian Empire currently controls 37 star systems, Admiral Pearson explained, pointing to a holographic map. Their military strength is considerable, but our intelligence suggests their forces are stretched thin. More importantly, we have developed technologies that they have never encountered. Based on our simulations, we believe we can make a significant impact on this war. He paused, looking around the room. But make no mistake, joining this conflict means putting Earth at risk. If we fail, the Draxians will surely target our planet next. As Admiral Pearson returned to his seat, Dr. Lisa Martinez took his place. She was a leading expert on alien cultures and had spent years documenting the humanitarian crisis caused by the war. The toll of this conflict extends beyond military casualties, Dr. Martinez said, her voice steady but emotional. Trillions of sentient beings across the galaxy are suffering. Entire species face extinction. Refugees number in the hundreds of billions. This is not just a war, it is a struggle for the very soul of our galaxy. She showed images of refugee camps on coalition worlds, of children from dozens of species orphaned by the conflict, of once beautiful planets reduced to lifeless rock. We have the ability to help, she concluded. The question is, do we have the will? For 6 hours, the Security Council debated. Some argued that Earth should remain neutral, focusing on its own defense. Others insisted that humanity had a moral obligation to help. The debate was heated but respectful, with all sides understanding the historic nature of their decision. As evening fell on New York, President Wright called for a vote. One by one, the representatives cast their votes. The result was unanimous. Earth would join the coalition against the Draxian Empire. President Wright then addressed the full United Nations General Assembly, where representatives from every nation on Earth had gathered. The entire world watched through broadcasts as she stepped to the podium. For too long we have watched from the sidelines as civilizations burn, she said, her voice firm and clear. We have been deemed too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable to join galactic society. Perhaps those very traits are exactly what this situation requires. She looked directly at Ambassador Xerax. The people of Earth have voted to join your coalition. We will commit our forces, our technology, and our unique perspective to ending this war, not just for the coalition's sake, but for all beings who suffer under the shadow of conflict. Ambassador Xerax bowed deeply, all 4 arms extended in the coalition's highest form of respect. However, President Wright continued, we join on one condition. We will not be junior partners or cannon fodder. Earth will have an equal voice in all strategic decisions. After a moment's hesitation, Ambassador Xerax nodded his agreement. The decision was made. For the first time in its history, Earth would fight in a war among the stars. The Coalition Grand Fleet orbited the gas giant Novolith, its massive ships arranged in perfect military formation. Over 8,000 vessels of various sizes and designs represented the combined military might of 17 advanced civilizations. It was the largest gathering of coalition forces in the 32-year war, and yet many coalition commanders watched with barely hidden disdain as 12 human vessels approached. They send 12 ships, General Thax of the Meridian Forces said with a snort. 12 when we requested their full military support. This is what Earth considers help? Admiral Zorn of the Coalition's Third Fleet shook his head. I warned High Command this was a mistake. These humans have no experience in space warfare. They will be a liability, not an asset. The human ships were indeed small, compared to the massive Coalition battlecruisers. Each was roughly 1/5 the size of a standard Coalition destroyer. Their design was unusual, sleek and angular where coalition ships were bulky and rounded. They moved in perfect formation, approaching the coalition command vessel with precise control. Colonel Daniel Garcia stood on the bridge of the lead human ship, the UES Intrepid. At 45 years old, he was one of Earth's most experienced space commanders, though this would be his first actual combat mission. Like all Earth's military leaders, he had trained extensively in simulations based on observed coalition Draxian battles. Receiving transmission from Coalition Command, reported Lieutenant Eric Washington, the ship's communications officer. Though only 30 years old, Washington was Earth's foremost expert on Draxian language and psychology, having studied every piece of information available about the enemy. On screen, Colonel Garcia ordered. The face of Supreme Commander Vrax appeared. The ancient Solarian's features were stern, 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he examined the human officer. Colonel Garcia, the Coalition welcomes Earth's contribution, Vrax said, the pause making his skepticism clear. Your vessels will be assigned to the rear guard during the coming battle. This will allow you to observe our tactics while remaining relatively safe. Garcia smiled politely. With respect, Commander, we request a more active role in the coming engagement. My ships and crew are fully prepared for frontline operations. Vrax's eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of surprise or possibly irritation. Colonel, the Draxian fleet has destroyed vessels far more advanced than yours. I cannot in good conscience place your ships at such risk. Perhaps a compromise, suggested Major Karen Lewis, stepping into view beside Garcia. At 38, Lewis had gained a reputation as a tactical genius during Earth's limited conflicts with space pirates near Mars. Her unconventional approach to warfare had raised eyebrows among traditional military leaders, but had proven effective. We could take point position for the initial approach, Lewis continued. If our tactics prove ineffective, we'll withdraw to your suggested position. Vrax studied the humans for a long moment. Very well. But at the first sign of failure, you will retreat. I will not have Earth's first participation in this war end in a massacre. After the transmission ended, Colonel Garcia turned to his bridge crew. Well, that went better than expected. They still think we're primitive fools walking into slaughter, said Major Lewis with a slight smile. That works in our favor. Lieutenant Washington nodded in agreement. The Draxians will make the same assumption. They'll consider us the weakest point in the coalition formation. In the ship's engineering section, Chief Officer Paul Bennett made final adjustments to the propulsion systems. Bennett had helped design the revolutionary drive that allowed Earth ships to execute maneuvers impossible for larger coalition vessels. Ready for your crazy flying, Major Lewis, Bennett reported over the comm. Just try not to tear my engines apart. As the human ships moved into formation at the front of the coalition fleet, a message arrived from Earth. President Wright's face appeared on the main screen. Colonel Garcia, you carry humanity's hopes with you, she said solemnly. Remember, your mission parameters. This isn't about proving our worth or achieving glory. It's about ending this war quickly with minimal casualties on all sides. Garcia nodded. Understood, Madam President. If all goes according to plan, this war will be over in about 3 hours. As the coalition fleet prepared to jump to Draxian space, few believed the human colonel's confident prediction. They had been fighting for 32 years. What difference could 3 hours possibly make? They were about to find out. The coalition war room buzzed with activity. Holographic displays showed the positions of thousands of ships. Officers from 17 different species moved about, checking data and giving orders. At the center of the room stood a large circular table where the final battle plan was being discussed. Supreme Commander Vrax pointed to the main display showing the Draxian homeworld and its defensive fleet. Our intelligence suggests they have positioned their main forces here, here, and here, he said, highlighting 3 clusters of red dots. We will execute a standard 3-pronged assault. First wave will engage their outer defenses while the second and third waves move to flank positions. Other coalition commanders nodded in agreement. It was a traditional approach they had used many times before. Sometimes it worked, often it didn't. But it was familiar. The battle will likely last several weeks, continued Admiral Zorn. We project casualties at approximately 30% of our forces. Colonel Garcia and Major Lewis exchanged glances. They had been silent during the briefing, observing the coalition's planning process. Now Garcia cleared his throat. Commander, Frax, with your permission, I'd like to suggest an alternative approach. The room fell silent. Coalition officers looked at the human with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright dismissal. By all means, Colonel, Frax said, his tone polite but skeptical. Earth's perspective is why we invited you here. Garcia nodded to Major Lewis, who stepped forward. All eyes turned to her as she accessed the holographic controls. The Coalition has been fighting this war for 32 years using conventional tactics, Lewis began. You attack, they defend. They attack, you defend. It's become predictable to both sides. She manipulated the display, showing a new formation. Instead of the neat, ordered lines of the Coalition plan, her display showed what looked like chaos. Ships moving in seemingly random patterns. Humans have a long history of asymmetric warfare, Lewis continued. When facing a stronger enemy, we don't try to match their strength, we change the nature of the fight. General Thax snorted. This is not some primitive ground war. This is advanced space combat. The principles remain the same, Lewis replied calmly. The Draxians expect you to follow your standard tactics. They've studied them for decades. What they won't expect is this. She zoomed in on the display, showing the human ships executing a complex series of maneuvers that made several Coalition officers blink in confusion. What exactly are we looking at? Asked Admiral Zorn. A pattern the Draxians won't recognize, Lewis explained. It appears random, but follows mathematical principles based on Earth's natural systems, specifically murmurations of birds and movement patterns of certain fish schools. It will make our ships nearly impossible to target effectively. Lieutenant, Washington stepped forward. But that's not our primary strategy. While the fleet movements will confuse their targeting systems, I've developed a communications approach that targets their command structure in a way they won't expect. He brought up a complex display of Draxian communication networks. Their entire military is built on a rigid hierarchy. Orders flow from the top down with little initiative permitted at lower levels. We don't need to destroy their ships. We just need to disrupt their command structure. Washington described a communications virus based on his studies of Draxian language patterns. Once deployed, it will create confusion in their chain of command, not by taking their systems offline, but by subtly altering messages as they pass through the network. The Coalition officers stared in silence. This was unlike any battle plan they had ever considered. And there's a third component, added Dr. Olivia Blake, joining the group. As the team's cultural specialist, she had studied Draxian society extensively. While their military is engaged, we'll speak directly to their civilian population. The Draxian people have never heard the truth about this war. Their leaders have kept them isolated. We're going to change that. Commander Vrax studied the humans carefully. This is most unorthodox. How long would it take to implement this plan? Colonel Garcia met his gaze steadily. Give us 3 hours once we're in position. Just 3 hours. The war room erupted in disbelieving comments. 3 hours to end a 32-year war? Impossible. This is madness. But something in Garcia's confident expression gave Commander Vrax pause. 3 hours, Vrax finally said. You have 3 hours to prove your approach. If it fails, we revert to the original plan. The humans nodded. The Coalition had just handed them their chance. The Coalition fleet exited hyperspace at the edge of the Draxian home system. 8,000 Coalition ships arranged in perfect battle formation, with 12 human vessels at the front. On the Draxian side, nearly 10,000 ships stood guard around their homeworld. On the Coalition command ship, Supreme Commander Vrax watched with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The humans are in position. Let's see if their plan is as effective as they claim. Many Coalition officers expected the small human ships to be quickly destroyed. They would serve as sacrificial pawns, drawing out the Draxian defenses for the main assault. Colonel Garcia sat calmly in the command chair of the UES Intrepid. All ships, commence Operation Murmuration. At his command, the 12 human vessels began to move. Instead of charging forward in a direct assault, they executed a series of seemingly random jumps and course changes. They accelerated, slowed, changed direction, and regrouped in ways that appeared chaotic to observers. On the Draxian command ship, Admiral Krell watched with confusion. What are they doing? Is this some kind of malfunction? His weapons officer shook his head. Targeting systems cannot establish a lock. Their movements follow no recognizable pattern, Krell snarled. These must be the humans we received intelligence about. Primitive newcomers to the war. Focus all forward batteries on their vessels. They cannot evade forever. But the Draxian weapons continued to miss. The human ships moved like a flock of birds, each changing course in perfect coordination with the others, creating a flowing, unpredictable pattern. Chief Officer Paul Bennett monitored the propulsion systems aboard the Intrepid, making minute adjustments to maintain the complex flight path. The ship shuddered under the strain of maneuvers no vessel had ever attempted before. Holding at 93% efficiency, Bennett reported. She's handling beautifully. As the human ships danced through space, drawing the attention of the Draxian fleet, Lieutenant Washington activated the second phase of their plan. He initiated the communications virus that began to spread through the Draxian network. Virus deployed, Washington confirmed. Infiltrating their command channels now. Within minutes, Draxian ships began to receive conflicting orders. Some captains were told to advance, others to retreat. Some were ordered to focus fire on specific targets that didn't exist. The perfect coordination that made the Draxian fleet so formidable began to break down. On the Draxian command ship, Admiral Krell pounded his fist on his control panel. What is happening? Why are units breaking formation? His communications officer worked frantically. Sir, there appears to be confusion in the relay network. Orders are being misinterpreted. While the military channels fell into disarray, Lieutenant Susan Miller began the third phase of the human plan. From her station on the UES Intrepid, she broadcast a carefully crafted message, not to the Draxian military but directly to the Draxian civilian population. People of Draxia, Miller began, her voice translated perfectly into the Draxian language. For 32 years you have been told that this war is necessary for your survival, that the coalition seeks to destroy your way of life. Today, we bring you the truth. The broadcast bypassed the military censors, reaching homes, public spaces and communication devices across the Draxian homeworld. For the first time, ordinary Draxians heard an unfiltered message from the other side. Miller continued, speaking not with threats or demands, but with understanding and respect for Draxian culture. She referenced ancient Draxian philosophies of peace and harmony, values that had been suppressed during the Long War. We know your history, she said. We know that before this war, Draxia was known throughout the galaxy for its art, its music, its dedication to knowledge. We are not your enemies. We seek the same peace and prosperity that your ancestors valued. As Miller spoke, she displayed images of Draxian cultural treasures that had been preserved in coalition museums. She quoted from Draxian philosophers, whose works had been banned by the current regime. On the Draxian homeworld, millions watched and listened. For many, it was the first time they had heard these ideas in decades. Questions began to spread. Doubts emerged about the necessity of the endless war. The first hour of the human plan was complete. 2 more to go. Hour 2 began with growing chaos in the Draxian fleet. Ships moved out of formation, some firing at empty space, others turning to face non-existent threats. The carefully planned defense grid protecting the Draxian homeworld had gaps opening throughout its structure. On the Coalition command ship, Supreme Commander Vrax watched in amazement. I have never seen anything like this, he said quietly. The Draxians are in disarray without us firing a single shot. Admiral Zorn nodded slowly. The humans' unconventional approach, it appears to be working. In the Draxian High Command, Center on the planet's surface, Grand Admiral Korax received increasingly desperate reports from his fleet. Sir, Admiral Krell reports his flagship systems are giving contradictory readings. 3 battle groups have lost contact with command. 5 more report receiving conflicting orders. Korax's face darkened. How is this possible? Our communication systems are the most secure in the galaxy. Another officer approached nervously. Sir, we have another problem. Civilian communications networks are being flooded with messages from the humans. Silence them, Korax roared. We're trying, sir, but they keep changing frequencies, and civilians they're sharing the messages among themselves. On the UES Intrepid, Lieutenant Washington monitored the spread of his communications virus. Phase 2 is progressing faster than expected, he reported. Their attempts to counter the virus are actually helping it spread deeper into their systems. Colonel Garcia nodded. Excellent. Major Lewis, prepare for Phase 3. Major Lewis had been studying the real-time data from the Draxian fleet movements. She had identified patterns within their confusion, the natural ways their ships tried to regroup when communications failed. All human vessels execute pattern Delta, she ordered. Target these coordinates precisely. The 12 human ships moved with renewed purpose. No longer simply evading, they now drove deeper into the Draxian defense grid, exploiting the gaps created by the confusion. They moved not toward the largest Draxian ships or obvious military targets, but toward specific points that seemed insignificant to observers. On the Draxian homeworld, Lieutenant Miller's broadcast continued, now joined by Dr. Olivia Blake. The cultural specialist spoke directly to the Draxian population about their history and traditions. For thousands of years, the symbol of Kalath has represented truth and reconciliation in your culture, Dr. Blake explained, showing an ancient Draxian symbol. Your ancient writings tell of times when your people set aside weapons and gathered beneath this symbol to resolve conflicts through understanding, not violence. Across the planet, millions of Draxians watched. Many had never seen this symbol before. It had been banned by the military government. Some elders wept, remembering the old ways. Meanwhile, on the Coalition command ship, General Thax grew impatient. The humans have created some confusion, yes, but we should attack now while the Draxians are vulnerable. Commander Vrax raised a hand. No, let's see this through. 2 hours were promised, and 2 hours shall be given. In Draxian homes and public spaces, communications devices began receiving messages not just from family members, but from Draxian ship captains and soldiers. The communications virus had bridged the gap between military and civilian networks. For the first time in decades, ordinary Draxians heard directly from their warriors. My ship has been in constant battle for 3 years, wrote one captain. Half my crew is dead. We were told we fight to protect our families, but I haven't seen my children in 7 years. As these personal stories spread, crowds began to gather in cities across the planet. Not in protest, but in quiet, solemn assemblies. They shared stories of lost family members, of hardships endured, of questions long suppressed. In the Draxian High Command Center, an aide whispered urgently to Grand Admiral Korax. Sir, there are gatherings forming in major cities. Thousands of people. They're asking questions about the war. Korax's face paled. This was something his warships and soldiers couldn't fight. The second hour was complete, 1 more to go. The third hour began with Major Lewis giving the signal for the final phase of the human plan. The 12 human ships, which had been positioning themselves at seemingly random points around the Draxian planet, now moved with perfect coordination. All ships execute final maneuvers, Lewis ordered. Precise targeting only. No collateral damage. On the Coalition command ship, Supreme Commander Vrax watched the tactical display with growing concern. What are they doing? Those aren't military targets. The human vessels fired their weapons for the first time, but instead of targeting Draxian warships or defense stations, they aimed at specific points in the planetary defense grid. Their precision strikes did not destroy the grid but reconfigured it, changing its energy pattern. From the surface of the planet, Anyone looking up would see a new pattern forming in the sky, the ancient symbol of Kalath that Dr. Blake had shown in her broadcast. The symbol of truth and reconciliation now hung above the Draxian homeworld, visible to everyone. Grand Admiral Corax stared at the reports coming in with growing despair. His fleet was in chaos. Civilian populations were questioning the war, and now this symbol, banned for generations, glowed in the sky above them. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "we're receiving a direct communication request from the human vessel." Corax hesitated, then nodded. "Put it through." Colonel Garcia's face appeared on the screen. "Grand Admiral Corax, this is Colonel Daniel Garcia, of Earth. I'm offering you a chance to end this war here and now." "By surrendering to you?" Corax snarled. "Not to us," Garcia replied calmly. "To peace, to the future of your own people." As they spoke, Lieutenant Miller continued her broadcast to the Draxian population, now showing images of the destruction the war had caused to both sides. Not just coalition worlds, but Draxian colonies that had suffered under the strain of supporting the massive war effort. "This conflict has cost both our civilizations dearly," Miller said. "Both sides have lost children, parents, friends. Both sides have seen beautiful worlds reduced to ruin. No one is winning this war. Everyone is losing." Across the Draxian homeworld, the crowds in the streets grew larger. They were not angry or violent. They were solemn, thoughtful, and increasingly determined. Many looked up at the symbol glowing in the sky, remembering old stories told by grandparents about a time before endless war. In dozens of cities, people began to march toward government buildings, not with weapons but with pictures of loved ones lost in the war. In orbit, Admiral Krell's flagship received a message from his own son, a message that should have been impossible to receive on a military vessel. "Father, is this war really necessary? Can we not find another way?" Krell stared at the message for a long moment, then made a decision. He opened a channel to all Draxian ships. "This is Admiral Krell. Hold your fire. I repeat, hold your fire." On the Coalition command ship, the atmosphere was tense as they monitored the situation. "Something's happening," reported a sensor officer. "Draxian weapons are powering down." The main communication screen activated, showing Grand Admiral Corax. His face was stern but resigned. "Supreme Commander Vrax, I wish to discuss terms for a cessation of hostilities." Vrax could barely believe what he was hearing. "You wish to surrender?" "I wish to end this war," Corax replied firmly, "before more lives are lost on either side." 3 hours after the human ships had entered the battle, the 32-year war was over. Later, as the peace negotiations began aboard a neutral vessel, Grand Admiral Corax approached Colonel Garcia. "In 3 hours you accomplished what the Coalition could not do in 32 years, the Draxian admitted. "You did not defeat our ships, you defeated our certainty." Garcia nodded. "That was the point. War isn't just about destroying the enemy. It's about creating the conditions for peace." As the news spread throughout the galaxy, many wondered how humans had succeeded where 17 advanced civilizations had failed for so long. The answer was simple but profound. The Coalition had been fighting the war. Humans had been fighting for peace. On Earth, President Wright addressed the United Nations again. "Today marks a new chapter in human history. We were not kept from the galactic community because we were primitive. We were kept apart because they feared what we might achieve." Across the galaxy, billions celebrated the end of the long war. And throughout the Coalition, a new saying began to spread. "Thank the stars, the humans only needed 3 hours."